Good evening, everyone. My name is Avas Sadiq. I'm the moderator of our today's session. I welcome you all on behalf of Center of Pakistan and International Relations, COPIR. Uh, Starting from the introduction of Center of Pakistan and International Relations, it is a strategic think tank based in Islamabad. We work on building a positive narrative of Pakistan at national and international level. We initiate and advocates policies of national development in order to build a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient Pakistan. Our center aims to act as a platform for the national and international speakers and intelligentsia to discuss various issues of national and global concern and provide policy recommendations and solutions. So COPIR also works on the issues of security, defense, and governance, and provide an in-depth analysis of national and international affairs, especially the one which thrives on the policy formulation and policy making. So I'm Avas Sadiq. I will be the moderator of our today's session. I'm a research associate at Center of Pakistan and International Relations, and my research interests are emerging technologies, their implications of national and international and human security and governance. Also, I work on sustainable development goals, and apart from that, I often moderate sessions and organize sessions for the Center of Pakistan and International Relations. We are having my colleagues, Mushahid Ustan Naqvi, who's a research associate at COPIR. We are having Khalid Latif, who's an advisor on the international affairs. And shortly, the president of Center of Pakistan International Relations, Ms. Amna Malik, will join us. So without further ado, I would like to proceed forward. And I would like to mention that our distinguished guest, Dr. Sania Munir, who is an assistant professor at the University of Lahore, would not be able to join us due to certain unforeseen circumstances. I will give a brief about her and then we'll move forward. She's an associate professor at the School of Integrated Social Sciences, University of Lahore. She's a research fellow at Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Studies, and she holds a PhD degree in Pakistan Studies from Pakistan Study Center, University of Punjab, and a split degree from Royal Holloway University of London, United Kingdom. She's a former Digital Humanities Fellow of Exchange in partnership between American Institute of Pakistan Studies. If she would have been here, she would have shared her insight on the digital governance in Pakistan, opportunities and challenges. But we will have a session with her soon and upload it on the Facebook and YouTube channel. So moving forward, I would like to introduce our distinguished guest, Professor Dr. Robert Kramer. He's an ERA chair, full professorship of. He holds an ERA chair, full professorship of e-governance with SKYT University at University of Tartu, Estonia. He continues to hold an assignment as an adjunct professor of e-governance in the Ragnar Nurse department at Tallinn University of Technology. Please bear with my accent or pronunciation. Robert's research is focused on digital transformation, cross-border e-services, electronic participation and democracy, as well as e-voting and all issues further developing a digital society. He is also the part of an editorial board of several research journals, and in 2019, he has been mentioned as one of the top 16 academics within the list of 100 most influential people in digital government by Apolitical. He has been the general chair of annual eVote ID conference series since 2016, before he founded and ran biannual eVote conference from 2004 to 2014. Professor Kramer has authored some 200 international scientific articles and has been cited over 1,500 times. He is a program manager of the Politics and Governance in the Digital Age master program and the master program at University of Tartu. He will be speaking about experiences and learning from developing a digital country, the case of Estonia. Our next speaker will be Mohammad J Sear. He's a digital government and public sector consultant at EY, Middle East and North Africa. Mohammad is focused on bringing purpose to a digital government He is a thought leader in the area of digital government, citizen centricity, customer experience, and an advisor to senior leaders in government and the public sector. He has obtained leadership training from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and Harvard Business School and holds an MBA degree. After a successful career of more than 10 years in the UK government under the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, John Mayer, and Tony Blair, transitioned into a private sector and has now been working for more than 20 years advising and helping government and public sector organizations in the United Kingdom, Middle East, Australia, and South Asia on strategic and digital transformation challenges. He in particular has helped government organizations becoming more citizen-centric and achieve operational excellence by harnessing conventional and digital capabilities, and the power of design thinking and particular has helped and in power of design thinking. Mohammad has authored a number of thought leadership papers. How can GCC government sustainably deliver better citizenship experiences? Now, what is the cure of a better patient experience in GCC? Application of the global star rating system for the public service and enhancing citizen experience. He will be talking about reimagining the government in the digital era. Our third speaker will be Dr. Noor Zaman. He's an associate professor at the Taylor University, Malaysia. He holds a PhD in IT from University Technology Petronas UTP, Malaysia. He has more than 16 years of teaching and administrative experience internationally and has an intensive background of academic quality in higher education besides scientific research activities. Dr. Noor Zaman has authored several research papers, edited 6 international reputed computer science area book, and has many publications to his credit. Apart from that, it is pertinent to mention that recently he have co-authored a book chapter titled as Digital Governance for the Developing Countries, Opportunities, Issues, and Challenges in Pakistan. He will talk about the current pandemic situation and the importance of e-governance. So moving onwards, I would like to check on our attendees. Yes. So I would like to invite Professor Dr. Robert Kramer to commence the session with his speech.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor and for inviting me to this important discussion. So what I would like to give you today is a bit of my personal experience of becoming a digital immigrant to a country that is, I would say, at least very proud to use sorts of digital, and that is the country of Estonia. So I myself am not an Estonian citizen, but in a resident for the past 7 years, come already from the Austria. I like notes, classical music, modern, and chocolate, a lot of mountains. And somewhat Estonia is a bit of the opposite. It's a flat country. It's about the size of Switzerland or the Netherlands. It only hosts about 1.3 million inhabitants. As such, it has only become independent again in 1991. So only a period of about 30 years of re-independence. About 102 years altogether that even exist. So very short history. Rebooting country after the Soviet Union. There's only the chance to basically try to compete with its bigger brother, which is Finland. Finland is about 100 kilometers north of Estonia. It's separated by the Baltic Sea. But all throughout the time of the Soviet Union, Estonian citizens, in particular in the north of the country, were able to receive broadcast TV from Finland. So they could see how their brothers that speak the languages. Estonians speak Finno-Ugric language. So it's quite complicated and a small family, but the Finns are it. So they could, what their brothers read them, how they could develop, how they could really reach out and develop to an international competitive level. And that was first and foremost through mobility. So mobile phones from Nokia, you all might know about, they really provided with an image of modernity to the Estonians when they became re-independent. And so luckily decided to know the path down of investing their small budget into vulnerability studies. They had about $20,000 available so the team's really, really small. And instead of going for big computers from elsewhere where they could only get a small share, they decided to buy 20 IBM PCs and run Linux on that, which also stems from Finland. And so they actually started to create an IT industry in the country themselves. And they also were having problems like, how do we actually connect our ICs abroad secure with our headquarters? And so they saw rather very expensive lines can be corrupted with security and coverage. They decided, why not go to the internet? We just can program asymmetric cryptography, which is published since 1978. So instead of buying the products, they just decided to use their brain and to develop things themselves. And I would say that is this kind of do-it-yourself culture that Estonia has established. It did things themselves. 1.3 million people, very small. And in 1997, really, this information society started. They started the project of the so-called Leap initiative. I was where they used some 4 million euros to connect all schools or public entities, the internet, and to make an IT or a campaign with their citizens to tell them how the internet works. Do you want to point anything out to me, or?
No, that's great. There's a distortion in your voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to do any better. I'm connected with cable, so I don't know.
Do you have any microphone?
No, I mean, I'm using a headset, so that should already be better. It's a good-only connection. I mean, I can change to mobile connection if that was better, but I don't. Let's give time to try. I might be away for a second. Okay, is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now. So,
Okay.
as you told that, what should be your suggestion for the Pakistan? Because Pakistan is also a developing country, a developing economy, and we are transitioning into a digital economy. Few of our platforms have become digital. Few of the public administration services, especially our Punjab province, it's leading. It's becoming a role model for the whole country as they have digitized their services. There's a citizens portal where you can complain about inconveniences or corruption or any such things. So but what should be the roadmap for a developing country like Pakistan, because Estonia is a model for the whole world?
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, the first thing is you need to understand the context in which this case is taking place, and that's what I'm trying to give you in order to be able to draw parallels and actually be able to contextualize the information for the country of Pakistan. Yeah, so the second point I want to make, the first one, there was a role that was a bigger that people to follow. The second was they took their fate in their own hands and basically decided to build the local IT competence, which is, I wouldn't say, not a problem for Pakistan. The third thing was really to actually start off cleaning up the administration. By cleaning up the administration, I meant make it IT compatible. Now, when you have same last name data, that is not a unique way of identifying citizens. What you need to have a unique identifier, like a unique number that defines who that person is. So to give everyone a digital identity. And that is the first thing that Estonia did. You can do that also with other ways of actually deriving it through additional properties and so on. But in one way or the other, you need to have a primary key to identify the user or the citizen in that case. So that was what the Estonians introduced, called EcoCode. So personalized. Similarly, they have for other entities that exist in public life, right? For universities, for companies, for ministries. So basically building a more relational debate. So defining personas, defining companies. So that really is a second, or the fourth step that's important. And then they started to understand what does it mean living in a modern information society. You need not only having a digital identity, you need to link that somehow to the physical person. And they did that to the national ID. In 2004, they introduced the national ID with a chip card that contains a private key, so an asymmetric cryptographic key pair allows them to sign digitally, but also to identify digitally. But that is usually something that doesn't go easy. So the important point was not of giving every citizen this card, but it was important that they learn how to use it. And they did that through two means. First, they found an interesting application that would bring people to try out technology. And the second was to find an application to be useful that they use every day. So the first one was really introduction of internet voting. So internet voting started out in 2005 with 2% of the vote cast electronically. And in the last 2 years ago, in the European Parliament elections, 47% used internet voting. So in 15 years, it went from 2% to 47%. But that's not so much the important figure. What's important for us is how many people use the card before they start using it voting. And first, the elections, 2% of voters first time use the ID card. So if voting in a booth has been kind of driver for the adoption of the ID card, but it hasn't been for the diffusion. For that, they introduced a transaction limit in the online banking. So Estonia has used online banking quite actively. But they used, for having secure means, they said, whenever you want to transfer more than your average salary, then you need to use the ID card. Yeah, so that was the useful age. That was the new pension every 2 years. And so with definition, having internally voting, I mean, some people and banking the ID card, they managed to really bring the ID card to be used by everyone. So in Estonia, it is absolutely uncommon for young people to know how to sign a piece of paper by hand. Yeah? People don't know how to sign a document, a letter by hand, but they know how to do it digitally. Yeah? So when you have an Estonian company, an Estonian university in an international consortium, it's terrible. They will always, why should all do the naming of contracts by a paper and really copy everyone? Terrible thing to send that out, you sign it, leave, and then it's done. It takes 5, and if you don't, it's like you can email the card from Estonia, we give you one. Yeah? So that's the ID card for people not living in Estonia. So basically for digital nomads, for people that want to do business in the European Union. So that's kind of like the fifth step, to make sure that people are able to use their digital identity securely and not by having to rely on big private vendors like Facebook, Google, or the like, the state, trust the state, and that they should be used. Yeah? So how they had iCard, the next step was to take up and clean up public. So what they started was, you should only have one place where you store the data. Sounds totally logic, right? I mean, why should you keep multiple copies of the same information? And they said, let's introduce the once only principle. Any information that the state has should not be re-entered by the citizen, but rather should be copied, should be linked by the state to specific data source. What that means is, you make clear who in the government is actually responsible for what. Right? Who is responsible for keeping the address of a citizen where a person is registered? That's the population registry. That is with the Ministry of Interior. If somebody lives abroad, that is registered in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If somebody is sick, that is registered in the digital patient record in the Ministry of Social Affairs. Yeah? So basically, what you need for that is actually an integration layer. You need to have a digital form which allows next to date histories to be there. And that date change was predicted by Lehman in 2001. So 2 years. That's the so-called X-road or crossroad that was developed in Estonia. So that's, I would say, my sixth point. With that X-road, with that data exchange layer, maybe you could mute Khalid, please, because we hear you And then bless you, actually. Sorry for that. So you need to have that data integration layer using the once only principle. But that allows you in the 7th step to have a different understanding of data protection. Data protection is very, very much needed because it means that the person is in control of their personal data. And when you have that information flowing around in the government, it's very difficult to make sure that you actually know who is accessing and using the data as, you know, per your wishes. So what they actually introduced was there is full transparency of who accessed which information about whom at which point in time. So you go to the citizen portal, ac.ee, and you can select population register, who has accessed my private data where I live of the government. And I can look down the list, okay, oh, that access was not right. And then you go to the data protection authority and say like, sorry, somebody with the ID code XYZ has accessed my personal data, why is that? And then the data protectorate will actually send an inquiry to the respective user. And if the user cannot come up with a legal reason, and not with just like, I looked up something. No, they need to have a legal reason why they were entitled to access the data. And if they cannot provide that, they get punished. And that goes even as far as people losing jobs. Yeah? So if this is a medical doctor that accesses your private health records without actually treating you, they will lose their license. Yeah? So it goes that far that the medical doctors will never practice again if they abuse your personal data. So you have a more elevated, a more modern understanding of how data should be protected, and allows you to protect the private sphere in a much better way. But you need for that a data exchange layer like the X-Road, which actually is open source. And then what you need, last but not least, is actually having this ecosystem understanding. You need to understand that where you operate in is actually an information system, an information society, that where you provide information, it also needs to be used. So basically having this understanding that all of these things, they work together, like what I said before, how to promote the ID card, that you need to find something that's interesting and useful, and through that, you're actually driving. But last but not least, let us not forget, Estonia is a fantastic story, it's a great narrative, and it works. And that is really probably the biggest achievement, that Estonia has managed to use and manage its country despite COVID and all the other threats that are around in a very efficient manner. So that's really what works. The second thing what works is, would you have been interested in Estonia without the digital narrative? Unlikely. So it allows Estonia to be put on the map. People know about Estonia thanks to their digital achievements. And so in a way, it serves like Mozart for Austria, like Swiss cheese for Switzerland, like, you know, the Rembrandt for the Netherlands. It serves as a way of branding a nation. Yeah, so Estonia is really following that narrative by putting itself on the map, by using the digital means to actually promote its actions and really bringing him or the country further in the digital agenda. So as such, it's not a surprise that during their mandate in the Security Council of the UN, they're really pushing digital topics. Yeah, so that's altogether what I would like to bring forward to you to understand the small country of Estonia, which has a very low hierarchy level. There is basically only the top level and the municipality level that allows really for very simple administration and a very efficient one by implementing the digital means. And you need certain elements for that, like the possibility to restart, a bit of luck that they actually also have a threat, yeah, by having an enemy to the east with Russia, that really helps the country to unite. And that, I would say, is my main takeaway that you should also consider. So develop locally, clean up your administration, make clear identification, ensure data protection, provide the citizen with means to enforce it, and provide with a data integration layer to allow for a real flourishing and dynamic development of the digital government. With that, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to your questions either now or at a bit later time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Robert. So there are a couple of things I would like to highlight that according to my research currently, up to 99% of the public services in Estonia are digitally available 24/7, 365 days a year. But I was wondering, I also read that they equipped their senior citizens or those who do not had a digital literacy, they provided them with the skill. But I have two questions in the mind that when Estonia started this project of digitalization of government services, is the internet services available across the country? First thing. And secondly, what model or what mechanism did the government use to literate people about in harnessing information communication technology or computers or internet for the for the government services?
So basically, for that to understand, it's important to see also when did it happen. So Estonia became independent in 1991. So I said about 30 years ago. They started with the Internet Initiative, that was the Tiger Leap initiative in 1997, so 6 years later. But that's only about 25 years ago. Still, that's almost a generation today, right? So basically what we talk in other countries of challenges, they already faced 25 years ago. So they brought all the public entities onto the internet, in particular libraries, and they offered public internet access hotspots. So basically when you drive through the country, you see big driving signs which have an @ sign on there and says 200 meters left, there you have free internet. Yeah? And so basically internet access became kind of like a social right in the country. So it's not really something special, it's just generally available. And libraries have become the place of exchange for people of using the internet. So basically people also help each other in the library to use the digital services in an efficient way, and so that there are no issues. So there is also this possibility of using the library as the common space where problems around the internet are being solved, and also where, for example, elderly, if they would not be able to use the internet, could get help from other colleagues. So that's really the spirit, and also having this, I would also say, this other important means of having positive feedback. Yeah. So between 97 and today, there was an immense economic development in Estonia. And so this economic development also was connected by people with the digitalization, even if that was not true. Yeah, a lot has to do with joining the European Union, with opening the market, with having more trade. Digital was what it was attributed to by the people. Yeah? And so having that positive spin of this positive economic development allowed people to actually continue using it.
Thank you. If Dr. Sir Khalid Latif, you or Mushahid have any question, you're welcome to ask. I would just like Professor Robert Krimmer to shed light on the e-residency program, because it attracted a lot of investors from across the globe to Estonia, and they provided them a virtual access, a virtual citizenship to enter the European markets. Yeah. Mm.
So actually, I mean, the e-residency is a result of not proper planning. Yeah. So basically, when you want to come to Estonia, you probably can do so on a tourist visa. You can come here, and when you are in Estonia, you can found a company, yeah, with your passport, and that's no problem. That's what you can do in most other countries as well. But the Estonians, when they introduced the ID card, they only made it available to people living inside the country. And inside the country, it was so successful that by the year 2014, the government realized, you know, there are actually a lot of companies. Why don't we make the annual results transmission, meaning the balance sheets and all the other administrative stuff, mandatory to be done digitally? And then they realized, we have some 400 companies which are governed by people not living in Estonia. So that's when they realized we need to have some kind of form of identification for the people that do not live in Estonia. And that's how e-residency was born. So actually, it's an ID card for people not living in the country, and replacing that need to travel there and show your passport. Yeah. So in that sense, e-residency is not a digital citizenship, as you said. It's a way of identifying you as a citizen of another country that lives somewhere else to the state in digital means, so that the state can actually operate with you in a digital. And of course, it allows you to run a company in Estonia, although you live in Pakistan. The only problem with that is that you cannot beat taxation laws around that. And there are international treaties that come into effect. So sometimes it's a bit more tricky, but certainly it's an effective and efficient means of running a company in Europe, within the European market. And that allows many opportunities, but mainly in the service sector. I wouldn't say so much in the area where you're actually transporting and using any merchandise or goods. Yeah.
Thanks for shedding light on it. One last thing.
Sure.
Is that what is the lesson that Estonia learned during this digitization process? Because I've read somewhere that there was a massive cyber attack on Estonia's data center, where the data of citizens and citizens was stored. So, what was the lesson that Estonia learned during this process? And you would like to share it with us, the countries which are in the nascent phase of this digitization.
Yeah, so there was no data stolen, what you referred to. That's the 2007 cyber attack on Estonian internet. And basically that was a so-called distributed denial of service attack. It's a bit like you would run too many requests on a server that they can answer. And it's a bit like when you think about an old fax machine. I know that technology is still there, but nobody really uses it anymore. But I mean, that was so easy to do a denial of service attack. You put a piece of paper in it, it comes out at the bottom, and then you glue it back to the end, and then it runs on and runs on and runs on. And that's also a denial of service attack, because the receiving line gets the fax machine. It goes on forever until the connection is lost, and then you just dial again. And that's the same thing that attackers did. They ran millions of requests to the servers in Estonia so that they couldn't answer anymore. So while that is a very easy attack, no data was stolen. Now, that's very important to face, but it was a problem that people couldn't use the internet anymore in Estonia during those days. What they have learned from that is that they need to have collaboration and not to put their faith on one system alone. So they have multiple internet access lines. They can shut them down with no problem. They have a lot of training missions. So Estonia now has the NATO Cyber Defense Center located in Tallinn, Estonia. So NATO is really recognizing the expertise of Estonia around cyber defense based on that experience in 2007. So Estonia really has upgraded its capabilities based on that experience, but during that time, nothing was stolen. And that was only because of this decentralized storage holding of information, which allows it also to secure it much more.
Thank you very much, Professor. So if anyone have any question, they can ask in chat or raise their hand. Now I would like to proceed further to our next distinguished speaker, Mohammad J Sear. Welcome on board, sir. I must say that I borrowed the topic of your speech because it attracted me so much that I used it as the title of our webinar. So I think you must be generous enough to let us borrow this. So go on, the stage is yours now.
No problem at all. So if you can just let me know once my slides are visible, because I'm going to take a little bit of aid. Okay, so I'll go into projection mode so it's clearer to see. Very difficult to follow on from Dr. Robert and the Estonian concept and model, one of my favorites and one which I talk about quite a lot. You'll hear me give examples of that. What I want to do is just talk about two different things. But the main thrust of my discussion or my point of view is that we need to stop thinking about digital and how we digitize governments to looking at reimagining government for the digital era. Subtle difference, but a profound, you can say, impact. Because when we look at digitizing things, and which I see across the world, how governments are doing it, Estonia is a outlier because they have taken things in a very different way. But majority of governments, when I interact with them and I look at what they're doing, they are taking what they have today and trying to just apply digital technologies on top of that. Now, not a bad idea, but what it does is it assumes that whatever you have today, whatever you're doing today, how you're doing today is the right thing. So what I'm trying to project out there is taking a different approach. And before going into sharing with you my perspective on that and what that looks like as a future, I'm going to go into a little bit about talking of Pakistan itself. You've already introduced myself, so I'm not going to talk much about that. But just to mention one thing, I really do believe that we as individuals who are working this space have a role to play. And if we're driven by a purpose, we are more likely to contribute to the change in the world. And my personal purpose is making a difference in people's lives. And when I connect that with my work, it brings me to helping governments to really drive citizen centricity as their top agenda and to look at how they can make a difference in people's lives. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk very quickly about a context. So coincidentally, when you reached out to me, Awais, I was actually in the midst of doing an analysis of where Pakistan stands in their digital governance journey. And what I have used as a base, and Dr. Robert will also be familiar with this, the UN every 2 years publishes what they call the e-government survey. The last one came out in 2020. Now it's evolved over the years, and now it's become more of a digital government rather than a e-government, but they haven't still changed the name of e-government survey just to keep it consistent of year to year. So I'm going to zoom into a few things that I have noticed about Pakistan when it comes to their ranking in the UN's EGDI ranking for 2020. And then I will go into talking about my perspective of reimagining government in the digital era. So the first thing that we notice when we look at Pakistan's ranking, it has gone down. It has lost 5 places. So it's gone from 148 in its ranking in 2018 to 153. So that in any case isn't very good because, you know, we're talking about between 190-ish, 93 countries or 94 countries. So being at the 150, 148 is not a great achievement to in the first place. And you may ask, and others may ask, well, why does it matter? Well, it matters because the whole core essence of EGDI ranking is to drive governments to actually deliver better services to its citizens. It's really looking at how governments are using technology to make a difference in citizens' lives. That's the core essence of it. And the ranking itself is made up of 3 different rankings. You have the Online Services Index, you have the Telecom Infrastructure Index, and you have then the Human Capital Index. And when you look at all of these, you'll see that whilst on the OSI, Pakistan's score has gone up, considerably where it's lacking is on the HCI, and the infrastructure in particular, although it's gone up, it's still a major issue. So I'm going to zoom in a bit to something else as well. So what else I had done was to take a dipstick kind of view of citizens of Pakistan to see where do they feel, who are using digital services today, where do they feel that in the future governments need to look at? Because even though there are many different digital initiatives in Pakistan, in essence, from a citizen perspective, it's still very complex and complicated and not making it easy for dealing with government. So, for example, majority of the people we surveyed want one single place for access of all government services. That is not the case today. There is a divide between the federal level and the provincial level as well. And when you think as a citizen, do you really care? You know, when you're going digital, you really want to make it as simple as possible. So that's one of the things. And we've looked at some of the other enablers as well, digital ID and digital payment and all sorts of other elements which we see around the world in how countries are using digital. The other thing very quickly to share on, so in essence, there are 6 things, and I'll go through them very quickly, that we have picked up as the you can say the challenges that Pakistan needs to overcome if it really wants to become mature in its journey to becoming to using digital technologies. Firstly, as many countries, and Pakistan is no exception, most of the things are happening in a very fragmented and siloed way. Even policy making around the digital strategy, today's policies are very fragmented, but not just on a federal and provincial level, but also at a federal level. It's also many different initiatives exist which overlap with each other. So that's number one. Your IT landscape as well is pretty much fragmented. So you don't have the benefit of shared applications or shared platforms that some of the other more advanced countries have. So every government ministry is today pretty much, I wouldn't say there are some outliers and exceptions, but pretty much is running their own technology stacks. So that's one thing as well. And everyone is looking at the citizen from their own perspective as well. There's no one common view from a government perspective to look at the citizen. The telecommunication infrastructure, and I'm not going to read through all of these, but just to point out that even today, after so much of investment over years, we still have 17.07% of people using internet. 0.85% fixed broadband per 100 inhabitants. And when we look at women in particular, and I look at the digital skills gap, you see only 3% of women in Pakistan could copy or move a file folder on a computer. 79% of the non-internet users indicate they don't know what the internet is as their reason for not using it. So these are very, very important things to keep in mind, because this is what drives a lot of the weaknesses when it comes to technology, the usage of digital. And if these things are not in play, it's very difficult to really turn to becoming a digital society. Cybersecurity, data privacy, and lack of trust is the fourth one, which we have put forward. And in here you would see some of the like ranking wise, 94 ranked in the global cybersecurity index. Even I know there's a great project called the Punjab Safe City Authority. It was actually blamed for leaking private pictures of passengers, so these kind of incidences break the trust of the people and creates a lot of challenges. Service design maturity, and I particularly looked at this because those countries which really have a strong service design capability or a culture are more likely to put the citizen first and use human-centric design as an approach, and therefore make a difference in people's lives. But that is very low in Pakistan, pretty much limited across government. And if I look at some of the examples I've tested, it's not well understood even what service design is. Then limited citizen participation. So I know there's been some changes, and you mentioned the citizen portal, but even with that, the activity volume is very low when it comes to citizens. You are a 200 million plus population, and potentially 50-60% of it who are citizens, active citizen involved in participation or could be in participation. So these are facts I wanted to just share because it's important to understand what the context of Pakistan is. Now, I really believe that the point of view which I'm going to share with you about reimagining government model could be an opportunity for Pakistan. Why I say that is that really already you're at a very low level of maturity. Now, you could decide to make a paradigm shift, because you don't have to go from where you are today to come up to a particular level and eventually get to the level of other countries. You can actually take a mindset change and really look to radically change the way you want to engage and deliver services. So there's two things I want to very quickly share before I go into the context of the point of view. Number one, we forget, but we all are citizens before anything else. Before I am who I am working for EY, I am a citizen of a country. Before you are what you're doing, you are a citizen. And we often forget that people working in public services, especially, that they are a citizen first before anything else. So they really need to think about themselves and about everyone else. Number two, today's governments have unprecedented power of technology at their disposal. Governments 15, 20 years ago did not have what we have today at our disposal. This device alone does everything for us. It has more computing power than what the whole of the computers had in NASA, which put the spaceship on the moon. So this is a huge opportunity for us. Now, what I want to share is that our world has significantly changed. We all know this, and COVID has kind of given us that hint as well if we didn't know it. Some time ago, we used to do everything, in silos, in physical spaces. Today, everything is come into one device. It could be your laptop or your mobile in most cases, and you're using the online space. And this is not going to change. I mean, if you look at some of the numbers of where we are today, we're talking about 6.6 hours a day on average we are spending, each on internet. That's huge amount of hours. 50% digital advertising, first time eclipsed basically in 2020. So it become more in the digital space advertising than in the non-digital space. 4.7 billion internet users around the world in 2020. That is huge. And 82% of internet users search online to buy a product or a service. And 4.1 billion achieve active social media users in 2020. These are huge numbers. And where is this going? We are talking about 5G, how it's going to change the way we live our lives as well. 1.2 billion 5G connections by 2025. Talking about 41.6 billion connected devices by 2025. And what astounds me the most is 4,900 digital interactions per connected person per day in 2025. So you and I, all of us, will be having that volume of connections, interactions. Now, a lot of them are going to be machine to machine, but this is a change in the way we live our lives. And this will continue, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's health, whether it's education, all the statistics are showing that as we go forward, we are going to become more and more doing things that we used to do in the physical, in the online. And COVID-19, I basically say, has put a spotlight on really this changed world. Maybe we didn't realize how changed our world was, but it's put a spotlight. And the second thing it's done is really given a tailwind, which is going to now significantly speed up our journey into the next phase of digital world. So when we look at governments around the world, of course, and these numbers I've picked out from the EGDI ranking of 2020 as well, the survey, 65% of UN member states now in high and very high EGDI group. And 22% moved into that from 2018. So in 2 years, there was a 22% increase. So you can see the pace of increase is increasing as we go year to year. And 84% of UN member states now offer at least one online transactional service. However, what I'm saying is that with all of this, because most of the transformations that have taken place in governments has been what I call technology first led approach, whether it's e-government or digital. And this has driven us to think in a much more fragmented and siloed way. And the fulfillment of a need is partial. Again, there are some exceptional countries, but in most cases, when you look at countries, everyone is building apps. Every ministry is building their own apps. There's very few countries who are looking at this from a strategic perspective and saying, we want to make the access simple for our citizens and give them easy access, one access point, whether it's portals, whether it's mobile apps, whether it's kiosks, contact centers, you name it. And when I talk about partial service fulfillment, if you wanted to start a business today in most countries, even though you can do these things digitally, as an entrepreneur, starting a business to you means something different to what it means to the government. For an entrepreneur, wanting to start a business means when I can service my customers, I can open my doors and I can sell my services. For a government, it means something different. It means that you have now been given the license to do business. Whereas for you, you may have to deal with 4 or 5 different government agencies to get different licenses or permits to start your business. Why couldn't it be that there is a service that is sold by government called starting a business? And all the different agencies, whether it's federal or provincial level, are linked together in a seamless way, which technology can do it today, to allow you to actually buy that service, and work orders are generated for each agency. So you as a user can simply get the service. That doesn't happen in most countries today. There may be exceptions, but by and large, it doesn't exist. The other thing it's done is, and we shouldn't forget this, digital is contributed towards the digital divide, not because digital is bad, it's because digital has been not used in a strategic manner. So if you think about who were the privileged people who had access to government services before, it was mostly those people who could access service centers. And most service centers were built in not urban areas, not in rural areas, in urban areas. So generally, the access to urban population was always difficult. Rural population was always difficult. And with digital being transforming services and being used as a tool, it's the same rural populations who are benefiting, who had before access. Now it should be that it should equalize access for everyone, but because there isn't connectivity, or there isn't access, or that there isn't digital literacy in the rural areas in most countries, then it means we are now compounding the problem of not giving good access to our citizens. So in essence, what am I saying? I'm saying that we should really look at asking some fundamental questions. We should ask ourselves, why do we do what we do as a government today? Are these things even needed or redundant? If still needed, is there a better way of doing these, or should someone else do them? And most importantly, what are we not doing today that we should be doing so that we can create a good experience for our citizens? And this to me means we need to go far beyond digitizing and make a paradigm shift to reimagining the role and model of governments. I believe that we need to look at building a new model of government, ground upwards, that is citizen-centric at its core. And to me, this means moving away from talking digital, which is a technology term, to talking smart government. Not just that, I have picked very specifically smart. Why? Because I believe smart is what we would like our governments to be. The exceptions of the world, like Estonia, is a smart government. They may not call themselves a smart government, but they're a smart government. Smart means being quick-witted intelligence. Acquire and apply knowledge and skills, think or respond quickly and efficiently. I would like my government to be able to understand me better and be able to respond quickly and efficiently. All of us would. So for me, the definition of a smart government is a system that has the ability to constantly identify, but predict also, not just know what is here today, and understand citizens before they have even figured out these needs, and convert this intelligence and insight into actions that enable citizens to live a secure, healthy, meaningful, content, and fulfilled life. It effectively and efficiently uses all resources at its disposal to achieve this purpose, whether it's people, natural resources, digital and other technologies, big data, advanced analytics, you name it. It should be constantly questioning and challenging the status quo. The one thing I learned when I was working in the UK government was to never accept what you have today as the best. Always push yourself to think more and more beyond where you are today. So for me, this smart government should move towards more of a facilitator, enabler than a doer, and be better connected to its core purpose of serving citizens. The principles that I believe should enable building of the smart government of the future should be these five. First, its focus is citizen life experiences. Its core is data analytics. The model should be ecosystem based, not doing everything themselves and building everything themselves, enabling an ecosystem and supporting your digital economy at the same time. The emphasis is digital by default, but not only, because we don't want to leave behind those and disenfranchise those who do not have access to digital means or don't have the digital literacy. And the obsession is outcome based results, not outputs, which a lot of governments focus on. And this means transitioning a very complex and cumbersome government citizen relationship, which is today, if you think about it, and I specifically looked at it from a Pakistan perspective, that you have two layers of government or multiple layers of government, but I've simplified it to two, your federal and your provincial layers. A citizen has to deal with all of these different agencies. There's so many different agencies, and there's two layers as a minimum. Plus, it is always the effort has to be the citizen's effort, not the government's effort. Today, I question why cannot all governments, once they've issued a passport, reach out to you and say, hey, your passport is up for expiring in 6 months. Would you like me to send you a new passport? Swipe right if you want us to do that, or swipe left, no, I'll do it in my own time. And you swipe right and it just asks you that question. Are your details up to date? Confirm. Is your address the same? Confirm. Yes. Okay, you'll get your passport in 7 days. If biometrics or confirmation is required, then there's another trigger that happens. But why can't that be possible, that we can move towards shifting the effort from the government to from the citizen or the user of government services to the actual government or the system, and in most cases is technology that can enable that. The other thing is reactive. As I said, it's not looking at proactively providing these services. You become now due for some kind of allowance from government. Why doesn't it just come to you? You get married and you fill out a registration of your marriage. Why doesn't it trigger off a need for questioning the people if they would like their ID card and passport and other documents to be updated because they've got married and they may want to change their name? And the need is becoming today, again, as I mentioned earlier, it is partially fulfilled. So this fundamental change could really, which is today, we can move towards what I call a future where there is a new layer and the center of government, which I call citizen life experience management. Proactively thinking and designing the experience as a country I want, as a government that I want to give my citizens, from cradle to grave. And then looking to activate these through a single unified access point of government, an omni-channel experience with digital first, and life moment-based services. At the same time, looking to drive the private sector and the third sector to play their role in fulfilling this experience of the future for their citizens. So this means shifting the relationship model. So today, most countries around the world are operating as a representative form of government. And rightly so, that was the right model. And it was designed years ago. And one of the reasons for its design was that it wasn't possible for large numbers of people to contribute or be involved in running our country. But I think we need to shift towards a participatory governance model where citizens are continuously involved in setting priorities and making policy decisions and being involved in that, rather than as it was with a representative form of government once every election year. So that relationship change is also something that we want to see. Then when it comes to the technology, today, the siloed approach towards much more of a future integrated and connected as government as a platform rather than as independent silos, every one running their own technology stacks. Again, it's nothing wrong with what happened. There was a reason, the context was different years ago, but now we have much more available on our hands, especially like cloud, that enables us to move to a different model of running our technology stacks and starting to share application layers, etc. And also taking a much more holistic view rather than a very siloed and blinkered view. I call that looking at three different lenses, or looking at this through three different lenses. The first one is the lens of the different pillars of your country. You normally have a legislative branch or an executive branch and a judiciary branch. We should be looking at all of these if we want to really look at holistic transformation. And then we should be thinking about digital in all interactions, whether it's G2G, G2B, G2C, or G2E. Often G2E gets missed, but they're a big, important part of it. There is a fifth one, which I sometimes talk about, which is your partners or your suppliers who are in that ecosystem as well. That should be also thought of as well. And then when it looks at a specific entity, I'm breaking it down into four levels of a entity as an organization. Your leadership level, so how do we use technology in direction, governance, performance management? How do we use it in our front end, the channels, the communication, and the services? And then how do we use it in our production layer, which has the core business processes, and not forgetting the enabling layer of an organization, which is your HR, IT, procurement, etc. So this, to me, requires a shift of our mindset from a technology first-led to a experience first-led approach. Thank you. I'll pause here.
Thank you very much for your meticulous insight on the subject and a wonderful presentation, Mr. Mohammed. So I have a question from one of our panelists, Mr. Khalid Latif. As we know that tech optimists often claim that the proliferation of the digital technologies can revolutionize the political and governance system. But there's a dilemma at one end that it can be supportive of democratic system, while on the other side, it can be detrimental and it can help yield a rigorous authoritarian and oppressive regimes. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, so it's a very difficult problem to solve, because one of the reasons why I believe countries like Estonia have been so successful is because it's the mindset of how they approach things and what they think about. And if you are going to be thinking positively and you are looking at making a positive change in the life of citizens, and you really do think of yourself as a policymaker, you really think of yourself as a citizen, and you are there to make a difference in people's lives and serve them, obviously you would put them at the heart of your thinking, and you will start to design things in a way that will enable that future life experience. But the challenge is when politically or otherwise there are interests at play which are, you can say, higher in the power paradigm, then it can be misused in many ways. But I don't believe we should stop because of that fear. The direction should be about breaking down these barriers and walls and moving towards a model which will enable us to live better as citizens. If the answer to the question is 70-80%, we're going to make if the the percentage change that is going to be created versus the percentage barriers that it will put up or the damage, then I think we go forward and we look to transform. If obviously it is a kind of context or political regime where it could be used in an obsessive way to really even further diminish the rights of people and create further barriers and difficulties, then obviously it will not be the right approach to take. But in any case, it comes down to not the technology. As I said, it's about the mindset, what you are thinking about and how you're thinking about using it. Any good technology can be used badly, and any bad technology could be used in a good way, So it comes to that. I don't know if I've answered the question that in the way you were framing it.
Yes, you were spot on. As I've read somewhere that technology can improve or undermine the democracy. All it depends that who is controlling it and in whose hand it is right now. I have one more question.
Just before you go there, let me just give you an example. So today, it is very much possible that the member of parliament, his or her agenda could be driven on a daily basis by the things that are important to their constituents. Technology can enable that. So you could imagine, as a member of parliament, you have an app or some kind of platform that keeps you much more connected with your constituents on a daily basis. And what you're going to raise in parliament or take forward for policy, making a point of view in parliament or elsewhere, could be driven by the priorities of your constituency. And if you think about what's the reason why we would select a representative, the role of a member of parliament is very simple. It is to voice and raise the needs and concerns of his or her constituency and try and fight to get those problems solved. Whether it's development, whether it's about healthcare, roads, etc. Whether they win or not is irrelevant. That's a secondary thing. But at least they should be raising those. So the first problem we have in today's model is, in most cases, the constituents are unable to connect with their member of parliament beyond the day of election, because the relationship breaks after they have solicited the vote and got elected. In most cases, I'm not saying it's everywhere, but in most cases, it's very difficult for you and me as an individual who wants to connect with their member of parliament to raise a concern for their constituency. Very difficult. But technology enables that. It can enable it, I mean.
Indeed. One more thing, I need your comment on this. As we can foresee that the future is digital and there will be the digital governance and public administration systems. People often call it a utopia or a far-fetched thinking that one day any citizen would be able to contribute his, or share his consensus on something that a government at local or national level, federal level is doing, like in the policy making, in taking certain decisions, in making laws and regulations. What do you think? Is it a realistic approach, or is it just a utopia?
So firstly, it is already happening today. It's not that it's not happening. Certain countries, no, I'm not saying it's happening in a wholesale and really everything and everywhere, but there are many examples, especially in Latin America, you'll find where even participatory budgeting is happening, and the members of that constituency or town or place are contributing towards setting priorities for how the money is going to be used for their development in the area. So there is that form being tested, and you must have heard of open government as a concept, and that is what is driving a lot of thinking around how do we get more and more citizen engagement and citizen involvement in running of a country. And it's very possible today more than ever before because of the technology that we have at our disposal. And even the UN, in the recent the 2020 report they put out, they have included a chapter on e-participation or participation. So pretty much every country, by and large, is working towards an e-participation model of some form. Now, how mature or how forward-thinking it is country to country, but it's very possible. So it's not a dream that can't be realized, but it's just down to each country and how politically driven they are and how much do they really want to engage with citizens. Technology is there, the models are there which can be used, and many experiments have taken place. So it's very much possible, and I hope we move as a nation, as a globe, more and more towards that model, because the collective wisdom and power of all of us is much more than a few. At least that's my belief, so.
Indeed, that's very insightful. One last question, and then I'll move on towards Professor Kramer, because we have a question for him as well. I would just like I'd like to ask you that, is there any current case or scenario where machine learning, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things is being used by the governments for their efficient and effective service delivery?
Yeah, there's many examples. First of all, there's a number of countries who have established AI strategies, which includes looking at how building use cases for how they can apply this technology in a positive way for service delivery. UAE is a very good example. There is a ministry even of AI which was created. Um, Estonia has a strategy. I'll let Dr. Robert talk more about it for AI and that. IoT is slightly behind, although some countries are ahead, but that's something which is starting to now take a lot more shape because of 5G rollouts that are happening. It's giving a lot more wind to using IoT as a technology for service delivery in some shapes or form. Even blockchain is something that is creating some benefits, especially on the pharmaceutical value chain, which in most cases there is huge wastages in pharmaceutical supply chain, and they're looking at using blockchain as a model. Saudi Arabia, for example, also has established a AI agency, again, to look at building use cases for how the AI can be used in service delivery, improving the way they predict, more on the prediction side. How can they predict to providing better services? And on your basic portals and apps, we are seeing the application of AI and machine learning to get towards more personalized services, so they recognize you, they learn about you, and they are able to push information and recognize you when you visit again, so that it can personalize services as well. So definitely there are many case examples around the world that we see. Brazil is another country which is really heavily investing in this and going, other than the typical like UK and Denmark and Australia and Canada, which are quite strong in this space as well. I mean, Canada itself is kind of I would say Montreal is the center for AI in the world. There's a lot happening in Montreal and Canada generally around AI, because they've gone down the training route quite a bit in investing time and getting people trained in that space.
Yes, thank you. Now I will ask a direct question to Professor Robert. Khalid Latif, our advisor, is asking that if a professor can further elaborate on the experience of Estonia in the blockchain technology.
Okay, so Estonia is very often quoted as the blockchain nation, but I have to say Estonia is not using blockchain the way that people expect it to be. So what Estonia is using is actually so-called Merkle trees, which is the changing part of blockchain, yeah? The one that is about tying entries together so you cannot get them apart. And that is used to actually logging the data exchange that takes place through the X-road, the data exchange, the data integration layer that I was talking about earlier. So any communication that is going on through the integration layer is actually being documented in log files at each of the separate security servers, which are installed at each of the base registries. And that is what is the source for the data protection functionality, the transparency function that I talked about before, so that you always know who has access, which information at which point in time. But what is not the case, that this is an integrated database like the blocks that you would talk about in blockchain. So it's not a distributed database that Estonia is running. Rather, it's a distributed architecture that allows for logging of all the information that is taking on using a similar technology as is the basis for the blockchain technology. As such, that is what is going to be key. In a similar manner, this logging functionality is also being used in the health sector, which is provided by one of the leading Estonian companies, GuardTime, which also uses a timestamping mechanism connected to that. And this technology is also going to be used as part of the currently ongoing research project that the Estonian Central Bank has with the European Central Bank on providing a digital currency. So there is a lot of research going on, but as such, I would not say Estonia is the blockchain nation. But of course, it's close to say that Estonia is also proactively looking into that technology, similar like AI, what also Mr. Sear said before, Estonia has realized the one thing: you cannot do AI if you don't have data. Yeah, and that is one of the learnings that Estonia had of the last couple of years. While they had a lot of very good data within the government, they didn't use the data that's available outside. Yeah, so outside that integration layer. So in a way, having that integration layer since early on was hampering their development of a proactive government, of proactively using artificial intelligence. And so they switched, because of exactly the open government partnership movement, to a more open, a more transparent, and a more active using and sharing of data, which allows them in the future to be like a Siri or an Echo or an Amazon-enabled country where you say, dear government, please issue me a new passport, a voice-activated command, and then the government just asks you back. So actually, is the picture that we have from you on record from 2 months ago the one that you want to use for your passport? And then you will say, please send it to me by email so I can double check. Yeah. So you can actually have an interactive chat with your government, but that's only possible when there is data available, both in a qualified form, but actually also in a bit more dirty way in order to be enabling that tool. And the one thing we shouldn't forget, AI is in the end using sophisticated statistical analysis tools. So whatever data you put in is whatever you get out. Yeah. And that means it is biased as the data is. If the data is very good, also the output of AI will be very good. So that's one of the really key problems that AI has when we talk about government, because government cannot be biased. No? I mean, a part of them biased on their own citizens and the residents of their country. But other than that, they need to treat everyone equal. And that is the real challenge about AI and moving forward. So you need to have very good guidelines, very good practice, and first and foremost, actually the competence within your government. Just as a short also, because that was referred to me before.
Thank you very much for your insight. With this, I would like to say that it is understandable that technology reduces cost, enhances communication, and increases transparency. But in its application by the government, it is still limited in comparison to the private sector or corporate sector. And this is why the World Economic Forum has labeled governments as the dinosaurs of the digital age, slow, lumbering, and outdated. So the analogies is spot on if we analyze the adoption of digital technologies of the governments vis-a-vis the private sector and the opportunities the government sector have availed so far, such as harnessing the potential of digital economy for lowering transaction cost, utilizing digital platforms for gathering customer or citizens experiences, and to increase the efficacy of their service delivery and ability to innovate and to adopt new holistic and inclusive approaches. So in the realm of governance and public administration, digital technologies can do wonder. Our experts, Mohammad J Sear and Professor Robert Kramer, I thank you very much, as they have said that we can leverage digital technologies for enhancing service delivery, increasing revenue streams, for effective and efficient public administration, and understanding the citizens and their demands and finding new solutions for already prevalent challenges. With this, we come to an end. We will soon bring another session for our audience. Thank you very much for joining us today, Professor and Mr. Mohammed. I hope we will collaborate in the future as well. We will formulate a post-event report kind of thing for this event. We will also share it with you. It will be available on our website. If we have consensus of both of you, we will upload this video on our YouTube channel. And I would like both of you to come on board with us, because COPER is working and advocating the policies, the digital policies to the government and to the public sector. We are working with several public institutions, and we will be furnishing a working paper or a white paper sort to them in the near future. And we would like to have you both on board, and we would like to incorporate your insights in that. Thank you very much for joining us today. hopefully we'll meet in the near future. I thank our attendees and our panelists as well. Mr. Khalid Saab, thanks for being with us, for asking the questions, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming and sharing your insight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.